At night in Hamburg, we had our alarms again, and you could see from we were maybe 10, 15 miles away from the downtown Hamburg, and you could see that all the residents and businesses and houses and whatever, they were all in flames, and the entire sky was lit up by that. It was a very eerie situation. And the next day, when we were able to go and take a look what really happened, you could see the chimneys of the houses or apartment buildings. You could see the chimneys and the basements. They were the only thing standing. Everything else was rubble. And I'm sure you have seen what it looks like in some of the historic sites that are in books and magazines. And some nights, well, first of all, everybody was required to go into a shelter or the safest place in a house, which mostly are basements. And some nights, my foster mother, she was listening to BBC London, and they were broadcasting in German where they had planes going into. Like sometimes the planes just went by us and flew to Berlin and gave them, quite a bit of bombing. And since we were informed by BBC London, which was very illegal, that they were telling us where the bombs were going to fall. And my mother would say, we can stay in bed tonight because they're going to Berlin or Brandenburg, and we are pretty safe because they're not going to do us any harm here. And it was true. We could see those bombs even at night when the moon was out, and you could hear the roaring of the engines. They had a very deep roar because they were going with a very heavy load. And then you also could hear when they returned the same way, that they were unloaded, and the sound was totally different. It was a very different high-pitched sound of the bombers. And the next morning we were outside whenever we had like a bombing, and the artillery that was trying to shoot down the planes, the bomb splinters were all over the area. And as kids and we collected those bomb splinters, which was like chunks of metal, and we played with them. That was our toy. The bombing was continuing throughout the war, actually. So what we did, my mother said, we're gonna go getting away from here because we don't need to be around all this bombing and killing. One of her daughters, Hedwig was the daughter's name. They lived outside Bad Oldesloe, not too far away from where the castle was that I explained. Not too far away from Grabau. And she had 5 little kids, and my mother wanted to take care of the kids, and I was put into school there, and we were actually living outside Hamburg, which is a little bit safer. But also at night we could hear, wherever you went, you could hear bombs going off. And sometimes they became the English Spitfire, which is a plane that's it's like a hunting tool, I guess. They came and they were shooting down the cows, and I could hear the moaning of the cows because they were at night at the field. And in order to see them, they had what they call Christmas trees. It was like a small object. You could, they came down from wherever the plane left, through them, and they were shedding a lot of light at night and in the dark, and they could see the objects that they wanted to shoot down, which mostly were animals. And that was done to discourage any Germans trying to show any resistance, because the war came to an end in 1945, and this little town was a safe haven for us for a while. Now I'm going to talk more about this little town because we spent quite some time there, and the war came almost to an end at that time. I think it was in May. And what the Germans did, the German military, they took all the civilian prisoners that they caught during the fighting, and they were taking them home, our home, to work in the fields. But in 1945, when the war was just about finished, they brought 3,000 people, which were Poles, Ukrainians, Russians, and they brought them all into our little town that only had inhabitants were probably maybe 500, and then the 3,000 prisoners came into this little town, and they were sleeping in the school, and they were just occupying houses, and it was really a chaos for a while. But nothing really bad happens, because I guess nothing bad had happened to them when they were under the control of the German army. So at night, for some reason, they got musical instruments like accordion and guitars and balalaika, and we had 3 soldiers, high-ranking soldiers, in our house where my sister lived, and they took me to the schoolyard, and we watched them dancing. And the dances were exactly like if you ever saw the movie The Fiddler on the Roof, that's about what they were how they were dancing. And it was a lot of fun to watch them. And this is where one of the soldiers that was in our house gave me his accordion and showed me how it's played. And he also tried to teach me on the balalaika, but I didn't like the balalaika. So one of the biggest hit songs during the last of World War II was Lily Marlene. and I could play it on the harmonica. And one of the soldiers, I think he was like a general, he took me down to a barn where a lot of people, like the Russians, Poles, who were all there, and they had like little concerts at night in that big barn where they had straw and hay and all kinds of areas where people were laying and sleeping on. And he asked me, the soldier did, he says, "Can you play Lily Marlene?" And I said, "Yes, I can." And I started to play Lily Marlene, and there must have been another 20 or 30 instruments. They all do it too, and they all played. And I felt like a superstar because I could make music with all these people, which was wonderful. And they came very quickly, those civilians, and they were all shipped back to their country, homelands. They had trains going in that direction, and they were just gonna bring them back home. I remember one item just before the war ends. A train came not too far away from our town and just stopped. Everybody left, and there were all kinds of supplies in there that we could go and just take. We had winter gear, winter boots, skis, all kinds of ammunition and guns, things like that. And it was an area where we always had lots of grass and hay where we could feed the cows with. And we took the cows and herded them in this particular area. And my little buddy that helped me, I don't even remember his name, he and we heard a Spitfire, which is I explained earlier, which was an airplane very fast, one-seater that was like a Hunter. It was an English model. Well, when we heard this, we kind of looked for it when it came by, and as it came by, we mooned him, and which is the pilot, and it was kind of funny because the pilot, started to grin. We could see his face. That's how low this plane was. And he came around again, and he opened up with his machine gun and gave us a few rounds, but we knew that he didn't want to come and kill us because he would have done that on the first day around, and then he took off. But it was funny. And I think I was 10 years old at that time. So I thought it might be something that is crazy to find out. I think this time we're now in 1945. In 1945, that was the last year of the war. The war was over in May, and soldiers came back home again because they were just let go. And many came past our house, and if we could, we helped them with clothing to get out of the uniform. And they were, they had to sneak back to house. to the house, their home. But 1946, now 1945 and 46, that was the harshest winter that we ever experienced. There was a lot of snow, a lot of ice, and you couldn't buy anything to burn, to heat your house with, because there was no such thing as the central heating. Everything was done by stove, and every room in the house had a stove. Kitchen, living room, bedrooms. You wouldn't put the fire on, you would be cold. And what we did, a couple of buddies and myself, we whenever a train came up the little, like a little incline, we could stop the train by pulling the emergency brake, and the entire train came to a halt. And then we went to the wagon that was, or cart, whatever it was, that they store the coal in on the train. We were just throwing that down from the train and then took it home to our houses so that we could go and burn it. And a lot of people, they took furniture to burn. It was so bad that anything was better than freezing to death. I want to go back to the end of World War II, which has devastated all of Europe. It didn't really matter whether you were a German, a French, an English, a Holland, and also the Russians. I mean, we all suffered from the after effects because you could not buy any food or get any food or raise any food because it was a very bad time. At the end, as I said before, things were not good. We ate sometimes cabbage only cooked in water with nothing in it because there was nothing that you could buy to make it a good meal. There was no such thing as a good meal. In the meantime, we just muddled along as good as we could, and I was about 17 or 18 years old when I met this little girl, Ingrid, that lived across the street from me, and I could not stand her because I didn't think that she was, well, I didn't think girls were good to begin with, so. But I think it was not too much later when I changed my mind on that, because I changed my total outlook on girls, I think. And we started to come together somehow, going to the movies or just go to functions in our little town of Bilverde. We went to dances, to neighboring towns as well as at our own. And Ingrid and I became friendlier and friendlier, and before you know it, it didn't take too long and we were engaged. And I remember one time Ingrid was not feeling well, and we were coming from a party, and my buddy Walter Mark, him and I, we knew exactly where her bed was in the house, and I decided that we should go and serenade Ingrid, which we did. And they were just about going nuts inside, her and her mother. And because what we were singing probably was not, excuse me, was not really too good. Because we had something to drink, and you know, when you drink, yourself, you sound good, but everybody else around you prefers that you don't sing. So we, I think it took about a year or a year and a half when we decided to get married, which we did. And I moved in with Ingrid and her mother, which was a very small apartment. And you only could go and be very careful to go from one end of the apartment to the other, because it, like I said, it was small. And we continued to do our normal lifestyle, which is, you know, trying to get a job, and which we did. In the meantime, I finished my apprenticeship as a painter and decorator, and Ingrid also finished her apprenticeship, and we made a little bit more money then, because you don't get anything paid when you are an apprentice, because everybody feels that an apprentice doesn't know anything, so why should he get money? But once after 3 years, we were okay, and we were making money now, like adults or normal people. We moved back to Boveda, to Tante Marta, which was a distant cousin or relative of Ingrid, and they had an extra room for us, which we gladly took, because it was just not working out for us to be in the very small apartment. And a year and a half after we were married for a year and a half, we had a little baby. The little baby's name was Regina. And it was probably the most exciting thing that I ever experienced in my life. And I think Ingrid too. And I always had the yearning to go and do something different than just growing up in Germany the way it was, which is you couldn't buy anything, you couldn't find an apartment to live in, and I knew that there was an Uncle Willie in America, in Philadelphia, and we after I talked to Ingrid for a long time to convince her that we should go and immigrate into the United States. And after maybe a year's correspondence with Uncle Willie, we got everything together that we needed, and we could go to America because we were accepted as an immigrant. And it was an big old ship. It was called the New York, which was a Greek liner that we got to get tickets to. And it took us, normally it would take 9 days to cross the ocean. It took us 11 days because of a heavy storm that we have, and almost the entire boat, the entire ship, they all were seasick, but Ingrid, Regina, and I, it had no effect on us. We did really okay. Well, like I said, after 11 days, we landed in New York. And we saw the Statue of Liberty for the first time, which was a very exciting thing. You also could see the Empire State Building, which was the largest building, I think, in the world at that time. That was exciting. And Uncle Willie brought his friend, good friend, Charlie, Uncle Charlie we called him, to drive us home to Philadelphia, because Uncle Willie had a neck brace on since he had a fall on a construction job. He was a carpenter by trade, and somehow he got injured. But he was okay. He just couldn't drive. So we came on, took about a good 2-hour drive from New York to Philadelphia, and we landed. Well, let me backtrack once. We also met Grace for the first time. Grace was the adopted child of Uncle Willie and Tante Mimi, and Uncle Willie couldn't really take care of her because she was 11 years old at that time, and it was very convenient for him to have Ingrid take over the reins of the household and taken care of Grace, who needed a lot of attention. And after living with Uncle Willie for about 2 years, in the meantime I did get a job. It was not that easy to get jobs here either, but I did get a job working for a painting contractor. His name was Carl Bauer. I made minimum wage or even less at that time. But after being with him for 6 months, I got a job with a bigger company and eventually joined the union. And at that I made $3.33 an hour, which was a fair wage at that time. After living with Uncle Willie for 2 years, we decided that it got to be too small in that house as well. And Uncle Willie was kind of a difficult person to deal with, and we no longer needed the attention that he required. And Grace, in the meantime, Grace was like 13, 14 years old, and things were straightening out with her as well. So we were looking around for a house. We found one in a neighborhood where Uncle Willie and Grace lived, and it was our first house. We had no furniture to put in there, but we had enough to sleep in or sleep on, and we had a kitchen set, bedroom set, kitchen set, and that's how we started out. The address was 3016 Diston Street. And it was a tremendous achievement on our part to come from Germany with nothing. We had hardly anything left. We had some money left, like $500, which I think we needed that kind of money for just making settlement for the house. And so that was our start in Philadelphia.